It's an election year, so there's been a lot of government proposals, but are they really beneficial to us, especially in the housing sector? But before we jump into that, make sure you hit subscribe below to stay on top of all of the latest Huntsville, Alabama real estate news. So the first one we want to look at is this $25,000 first-time homebuyer tax credit. On the surface, especially if you're not currently a homeowner, it may sound like a good idea because we have a lot of people, particularly millennials, sitting on the sideline waiting to get in their first home with this affordability crisis that we have. So we want to do something to help first-time homebuyers get into the home because that's how you build generational wealth. Homeowners have on average 40 times the net worth of renters. So again, this is an important issue. Unfortunately, this is not the way to solve it. The way to solve it is via supply and demand. Fortunately, we don't have enough supply in this country. And so just adding a fuel to the fire of additional demand is not going to help fix the overall problem with housing. What it will likely do is $25,000 tax credit, raise the prices by $25,000. So builders and sellers during that time are potentially going to win, but first-time homebuyers aren't going to be a big winner overall because the last time that we tried this with an $8,000 tax credit, prices came right back down after the tax credit was gone. So it shrank back down to that original price. Even if it doesn't shrink down, the problem is that this is inflationary. You've got either one of two things. You've either got people that are paying taxes for this bill, so it's almost like a socialistic tax, so somebody has to pay for it, or it becomes inflationary because we didn't have the money in the first place and we're just deficit spending. And so the same challenge that we had before. So you get people into homes, but everything else costs even more money. And so you have an issue with being able to afford the home because of higher gas prices and grocery bills and everything else. So the problem with housing prices is the overall issue of inflation. This is something that the government created. You look at actually the real value of homes versus the price of gold, which is true money, I mean, we're actually slightly below average. And so the problem is not the values of homes. The problem is the situation that the government has created by spending too much money. And you can't solve a problem with the same problem. The problem was we spent too much money. Now, if we're going to spend too much money again and have deficit spending, that's just going to further the problem that we have. So the second thing to look at is the proposal of grocery price gouging and limiting the increase on grocery prices. The real issue is that we've had deficit spending for the last several years, and the government has created this inflation. It's unfair to put that burden on grocery stores, especially when their profit margins are so low. This unfortunately has been proven to lead to shortages, and that's not what we want in this country. We do not want shortages on meat and bread and have bread lines and everything that some other countries experience, and so this would lead to that. Even Jason Furman, who was Obama's top economist, said this would harm consumers and is not a sensible policy. All right, so the next one is rent control. I think it's very easy to just say, we've already done a video on this. Economists agree this creates shortages and higher prices. There's actually a documentary film that's coming out about rent control in New York. Just a very bad policy. You basically get a lot of dilapidated buildings where repairs aren't done, and it leads to shortages and it leads to higher prices of units that are outside of this rent control area. So another bad policy that I hope to not see enacted in the US. So the last topic to talk about how the government is intervening is in real estate. So there's been recently a real estate settlement, which was a lawsuit outside of the government, but the DOJ was definitely involved in it. We have this affordability crisis across the US, and politicians don't want to point their fingers at themselves. They don't want to point fingers at the Fed, creating all these deficits and everything that we've had. And so we have prices that are much higher, and we have interest rates that are much higher that are leading to this crisis. So the Fed raising interest rates, and then the government printing money and the Fed printing money and creating all this inflation. So with that, who's struggling right now? People that don't own homes. Basically with the settlement, there's been a couple of things that have come out of it. One of those is that buyer compensation is no longer going to be in the MLS, and it's not the same system that we had before. What they're trying to do is lead to lower commission rates. Challenge is that this really isn't helping the people that we need to try to help, which is home buyers trying to get people into their first homes. It doesn't help them at all. It actually could raise their actual out-of-pocket expenses if sellers don't help them with compensation for their buyer's agents. And it could also keep them out of homes if they don't have the closing costs and the money to purchase their first homes. So who does it help? It could potentially help sellers, but probably not, because most sellers are also home buyers as well. So the biggest help is for people who have a lot of homes to sell. And who is that? Who's been buying up a lot of homes? Well, that's been Wall Street. Wall Street and institutions have been buying up hundreds and thousands of homes. And so I think, unfortunately, behind all of this, is benefiting potentially Wall Street and trying to shrink the overall cost to sell homes so that they can come into Main Street and be able to flip and trade homes at a higher velocity. So I work with real estate agents, and I've been talking to real estate agents across different countries here recently. And the one thing that they always tell me is our structure is the best and most efficient in the world. We have an MLS system where it's very easy to obtain access to all the listings out there. In other countries, you have to go on all these different websites and call around all these different brokers. It might take you days or even weeks to get, hopefully get all the available property back to you. You're probably only going to get a subsection of that, versus the MLS, which is going to have all of that data. So that's one thing that we have going here in the US. The other thing that we had going was the buyer compensation model, which benefited buyers, and it also benefited sellers as well. These other countries, these other agents that I've been talking to still have that structure in place. And so fortunately, we've had the best structure in the world. Unfortunately, we're taking a step backwards for home buyers. And then you look at other places across the world. Another thing that we have a huge benefit on is financing as well. We have the best financing and the easiest financing terms in the entire world. So we want to continue to make America the easiest place for home ownership, because home ownership matters, and we need to get more first-time home buyers in homes. And one of the best ways to do that is to keep government outside of real estate so that we can continue focusing on serving clients and providing the best value possible for our buyers and sellers.